I was teaching a course on power once, and a student asked me a question that stuck with me. He said, "How do you tell if someone is truly powerful or just popular?" I told him to watch what happens when they tell people to do something. If people actually follow through, that's real power. If nothing happens, that's just noise. That question came back to me this week. Zoran Thanin, New York's new mayor who takes office in January, called for a boycott of Starbucks. He posted it to more than 1 million followers, made a big show of supporting striking workers. No contract, no coffee, he said. But what happened? Starbucks had the best sales day in its entire history. Not good, not impressive, the best ever. And their stock even went up. The boycott didn't just fail, it backfired. Now, you might think this is just another political clash, mayor versus corporation, but to me, it signals something bigger, something that's going to affect your life, whether you live in New York or anywhere else, because what just happened exposes a fundamental truth about how the world really works versus how some people wish it worked. And understanding that difference, that's what's going to determine whether you thrive or struggle in the years ahead. Let me explain. When I farmed for years, I learned a lesson you cannot escape. Nature doesn't care about your plans. Frost kills crops whether it feels fair or not. A drought won't negotiate with you. You either understand how weather, soil, and seasons actually operate, or you fail. It's that simple. There's no arguing with reality. You either work with it or you get crushed by it. Economics is the same. Human behavior follows patterns, not because people are good or bad, but because they respond to incentives in predictable ways. And if you don't understand those patterns, your good intentions won't get you very far. Think about what Thami tried to do. He wanted to hurt Starbucks by pushing people to stop buying coffee there. Sounds reasonable at first glance. Stand with workers, show solidarity, use economic pressure to force change. But here's what he missed. Or maybe he understood it and didn't care because the gesture played well to his base. Either way, the math was never going to work. There's a strike at 65 Starbucks locations out of 17,000. That's less than 0.5% of their stores. Even if every customer at those 65 locations stopped buying coffee, Starbucks would barely feel it. Their revenue would dip by a fraction of a percent, nowhere near enough to force any change. But Mamdani assumed his 1 million followers would obey. He assumed people would alter their daily routines simply because he told them to. He thought a social media post could redirect millions of caffeine habits. It couldn't because people don't operate that way. What do most people do every morning? They want coffee, they're tired, they're late. There's a Starbucks right there on the corner, fast, familiar, convenient, and you're asking them to skip that. Find an alternative shop that might be farther away, wait in a different line, break their routine, all to participate in a labor dispute they don't understand and didn't sign up for. Most people aren't going to do that, not because they're selfish or anti-worker, but because changing daily habits takes energy and people already have enough stress without adding political calculations to their morning coffee run. That's human nature. It hasn't changed in thousands of years, and it's not going to change just because a democratic socialist becomes mayor. So what happened? Starbucks had record-breaking sales, and Mamdani unintentionally taught everyone watching a crucial lesson. His calls to action don't move behavior. His 1 million followers are mostly digital ghosts, numbers on a screen, not real influence he can activate. Now, why am I telling you this? Because this isn't about coffee or Starbucks or one failed boycott. This is about a pattern you need to understand, one that's already shaping your life, whether you notice it or not. Let me take you back to ancient Athens. They had politicians who made big promises to ordinary people. We'll take wealth from the rich. We'll make everything fair. We'll expand the empire. And the crowds would cheer. Why wouldn't they? It all sounded great. Then reality would show up. The wealthy moved their money to safer cities, investment dried up, ambitious military ventures collapsed. Athens grew weaker, not stronger. And what did those politicians do? Blame everyone but themselves, foreign enemies, anyone they could point at, instead of admitting they misunderstood how systems actually function. That exact pattern is repeating in American cities right now. Progressive leaders promise to rewrite economic laws. They'll make housing affordable by freezing rents, improve transit by making it free, lower grocery prices by opening government supermarkets, restructure capitalism itself. But it won't work, not because their intentions are bad, but because the mechanics don't operate the way they imagine. Pay attention, because this affects you directly. When cities freeze rents, housing doesn't get more affordable over time, supply shrinks, landlords stop building new units, existing buildings don't get maintained, quality drops, and suddenly it's harder, not easier, to find any apartment at all. When buses become free without real funding, service gets worse. The money has to be pulled from somewhere. Routes get cut, taxes go up, or maintenance is delayed until the buses break down. There's no magic button that makes something free and better. At the same time, when governments try to run grocery stores and compete with the private sector, they lose money. They simply aren't built for retail. They don't have the expertise, the logistics, or the incentives. They can't compete with companies that have spent decades perfecting the process of getting food from farms to shelves efficiently. And none of this is about political opinion. These are patterns that repeat the same way in every city that tries these experiments. You can wish the world worked differently, but wishing doesn't change the basic rules of economics. And here's what you need to understand. Mamdani is about to run New York. He made big promises during his campaign: rent freezes, free buses, city-run grocery stores. He said he'd transform the city, but his first major public action just revealed he doesn't understand how to actually change behavior. He can't predict how people respond to incentives. He doesn't grasp how power works in the real world. If he couldn't convince people to skip a coffee run, how exactly is he going to reshape an entire city's economy? He isn't, because good intentions without a grip on reality don't fix old problems, they create new ones. Now let's talk about what this means for you, especially if you're in New York, but honestly, this applies anywhere. Progressive politicians are promising sweeping change. Don't watch the speeches. Watch what happens when those policies collide with reality. When rent freezes take effect, pay attention. What happens to new construction? What happens to building maintenance? What happens to apartment availability? I can tell you now, supply will shrink, quality will decline, and finding a place to live will become harder. When buses become free, watch routes getting cut, is schedules deteriorating, crowding increasing, demand rises, supply doesn't, and service gets worse. When government grocery stores open, watch them lose money. Prices end up higher than private stores. Supply chain issues pile up, and eventually the stores either close or become permanent budget drains. And when all of this unfolds, watch who gets blamed. Not the policies, not the faulty economics, not the misunderstanding of incentives. No, the blame will go to corporations, wealthy people, capitalism, anyone except the people who designed a system that was never going to work. That's the pattern, and you need to prepare for it. Here's what you can do. If you're renting in New York, understand that rent control might trap you in place. Once you land a rent stabilized unit, it may become nearly impossible to find another affordable one. So you might have to stay even if you'd prefer to leave. If you're considering buying property, understand which types are likely to face future controls and which might be exempt. Make decisions based on actual policy structures, not campaign slogans. If you own a business, start planning for higher taxes and new regulations. Think now about how you'll adapt, stay small, restructure, or even create an exit plan if the environment becomes too burdensome. If you're building a career, make yourself portable, develop skills that travel well, build a network outside the city, save money so you have options. If the city becomes less livable, you want to leave by choice, not because you're forced out. And this isn't pessimism, it's realism. When leaders demonstrate they don't understand cause and effect, you need to protect yourself. The failed boycott is a warning sign. It shows Mamdani doesn't grasp basic human behavior, doesn't understand incentives, doesn't understand how power actually works, and he's about to apply that same flawed understanding across an entire city. And let me give you another historical example. Marcus Aurelius said you should focus on what's in your control and accept what isn't. Simple but essential when navigating uncertainty. What's in your control? Where you live, what skills you develop, how you manage money, whether you have options, how quickly you adapt to change. What's not in your control? Whether progressive policies succeed, whether politicians learn from mistakes, whether cities become more or less livable. And so focus on the first category, build flexibility, save money, develop portable skills, create the options, watch what actually happens, then adjust fast. Don't get emotionally attached to hoping policies will work. Don't shape your life around political promises. Base your decisions on reality, on patterns that repeat, on how systems actually function. Because here's what thousands of years of history show. When leaders promise transformation but don't understand cause and effect, ordinary people pay the price, not the politicians, not the activists, regular people trying to work, raise families, and build a future. When ideology meets reality, reality wins. Every time the boycott failed, Starbucks, that's reality asserting itself, and as going to assert itself even harder in New York over the coming years. You can prepare for that or pretend it won't happen. You can observe the patterns or ignore them and hope for the best. Your choice. But I know which choice leads to better outcomes. And Donnie just showed you he doesn't understand power, human behavior, or economics, and he's about to run policies across America's largest city based on that misunderstanding. That's not a political statement. That's an observable fact. Facts don't care about politics. They simply exist. Smart people build their decisions on what is not what they wish were true. So watch closely, think clearly, adapt quickly. Don't let ideology blind you to what's right in front of you, because the next few years in New York and other progressive cities are going to teach some expensive lessons about the gap between good intentions and competent governance. Make sure you're positioned to survive those lessons, not become a casualty of them. The boycott failed. That tells you everything you need to know about what's coming. Pay attention, prepare accordingly.